Hello everybody, it's this time again. We continue with our dolls, and I've seen some really lovely dolls heads, which I will show you on my phone screen in a minute. It's just that I tried, and this is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit late, sorry about that. I tried to put it onto the computer so you can see it straight away, but I think it requires a little bit more getting my head around all the technicalities, and I might have to Google it. I might even have to ask somebody else to help me. So if you've missed the first episode, don't worry, because you can watch it again on YouTube, and it's all about making a Hannes or Hannah doll, which is, this one is Hannes, this one is Hannah, out of the Making Soft Doll book. And if you've been lucky enough to get one of our packs, then you can use this as a sew along. Otherwise, you might have the materials at home, or maybe you still want to get the things, and then you can re-watch the 3 episodes. We're on number 2 today, and yesterday we made the head. Today we're going to finish the head and start on the body, and then there's a little bit of homework after each session, and then the last one we will finish off the doll entirely, and hopefully I get lots of lovely pictures sent after that as well. So everybody's done really well. I'm going super slow, and if there's anybody who wants to leave a comment, especially today on the live stream, please feel free. I know there's already lots of comments, so I'm going to have a little look because it's very exciting. I'm drinking, as always, my tea. If you're not yet a member of our Everyone a Maker Facebook group, then hop over there and ask to join. We just ask you to answer 3 questions, nothing too invasive or personal, promise you, and then you can join an amazing group where we support each other in the making, mostly needle felting, because that's what the business is mostly about, but our new line of craft supplies is now all about doll making as well. So join the Everyone a Maker group. Otherwise, we also have a group that's called Making Soft Dolls, which is a little bit more generic, not so makers focused, but still I love doll stories, and it's one of the things that I really want to see more of. Okay, so let's have a look what's going on here. No immediate, and also if somebody could let me know that you can hear me, that would be amazing. Right, so let's start at the beginning. Who have we got here today? Pamela. Good morning, Steffi and friends across the pond. Looking forward to your arrival. Oh gosh, are you across the big pond? If you are, it must be incredibly early in the morning or late in the evening. Well, depends which pond. Are we heading west or east? Let us know where you are, Pamela. Be nice to know. Oh yes, Emma has had the same thought. I think it's Emma this time, disguised as the makers. So apologies from Alex, I'm here. So Alex can't join us today. She joined us yesterday, but that's fine. She can catch up. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Steffi. Me and my son have really enjoyed watching all your felting tutorials. Aww. Happy birthday, Daniel. Hope you have a lovely day today. It's a beautiful sunny day where I'm sitting. I can see a little bit of blue sky, and as long as the sun shines in your heart, then it doesn't matter what you're doing during the day. Just let the sun shine in your heart and be with your family and your amazing mum, who's asked to wish you a happy birthday. So how great is that? P.S. He says, how's Tilly? Now, if you're, I only know one Tilly that I used to work with, and in all honest truth, I've no idea how she is, but I haven't heard that she's not well, so I'm assuming she's fine. Faith, good morning, Steffi. Morning, everybody else. Yes, it is 3 a.m. My goodness, Pamela, you should be tucked up in bed, fast asleep. Maybe you are tucked up in bed. Then that's okay. You can be awake and watch this live tutorial. It's oh, other people are saying happy birthday, Daniel, now. How nice is that? Oh my, you set your alarm, Pamela. I am so impressed. I feel like very honored now. How nice is that? Yes, we can see and hear you. That's always good. I'm not just talking to myself. Pamela is in Oregon. Woodburn, Oregon, USA this morning. Oh my goodness. I have refreshed as I couldn't even see you. Yes, sometimes you have to refresh the screen, which basically means absolutely nothing to you if if you can't see me right now when I say this, but it might in the future or later on make more sense. So I will show you a quick picture on my phone of what people have been making, and it's absolutely amazing. So I hope you can see this. And in fact, I'm just going to zoom in on the really close-up camera because it's probably easier to see it without the reflection. There. So I've been sent pictures of 3 heads, and they look absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love it. So it's really nice to get a little bit of feedback after the first day of how people have been doing with these heads that we made yesterday. So today we're going to look at finishing the head, and we're going to look at starting with the body. Now, some of you may have cut out the fabric pieces already. That's absolutely fine, but I thought I'll cover that today as well because I don't want you to feel I'm racing ahead. I'm just going to move this cup of tea, especially because it's empty. But I've also done a little bit of homework in that I have worked a little bit on the head, but I also want to do this live again here today so that you can see how I'm adding hair onto the face, bearing in mind that his head or her head will be covered up with a hat, a permanently sewn on hat, so you will only see the little bits of strands of hair poking out from under the hat rather than a bald head, basically. So you just ignore that bit. And I will continue on this particular part. So what I've done yesterday, and I'll just show you sort of a little bit more close up. You basically go into the, establish the yarn from the back of the head, because that's the part that will be completely covered later on. And so just sew a couple of stitches so that the yarn doesn't slip out when you go now forward, so you can go through the head, keep it tidy. And I'm sewing another strand of fringe here onto the head now. Now they're all pretty much the same length, so I'm going a little bit further with this one. And as you gather the strand in, it will show as a strand of hair there. You can make them very, very sparse, or you can go and make them a bit more bunched up. That's entirely up to you. You should have enough of the in a skein of sewing embroidery thread. You should have enough to do this. We're using a 6-ply thread and embroidery thread, and we're using all 6 strands. Sometimes you can split embroidery thread, and that becomes particularly handy if you're making doll's house dolls where you don't want such a thick strand, and that's why we like using the 6-ply embroidery thread rather than the one that's actually I think it's called pearled or pearl. I'm not entirely sure what it's called, but anyway, this one is the one that you want, 6-ply, and then you can split it if you need to. So the hair is pretty much done now, just gone in and out. Another one there, maybe another one here. Just imagine that you've got a hat sitting on top, and then if you look straight into the face, so the hat will be here, there, so you will only see that fringe that I've made extremely straight. So somebody obviously been cutting it with a pot on their head. There we go. Put that away, that last bit of strand, and I'm just going to tidy it away here on top of the head so that it's not visible where the hat doesn't reach. So this is completely gone now. There you go. So that's my my hair do done. There you are. There's the nose and the hair, obviously on top of on the top part of the head and the face. There you go. You can see it a bit closer up. Okay, it doesn't need to look pretty from the back, as long as it's neat and you don't have big chunks of yarn or anything like that that you could feel through the hat, then you're absolutely fine if it looks like the sort of graveyard of threads here at the back, and at the front you've got it nice and neat. Okay, so what I said is we're going to finish the head off, and I said that we would finish the face off on the last day. I've actually changed my mind. We're going to do it today, and for this and I'm only doing this because some of you already have done this. For this you need a felting needle. You don't necessarily need a felting needle if you decide not to needle felt the face. If you want to use embroidery thread, then it's the same principle, and I might just show you how to do this. You do, however, need a long doll's needle. I've got a super long here. Say you want to embroider the face. This is not what I'm going to do, but if you do want to embroider it, I'll just show you the difference. There's an embroidered face, and Hannah's actually has got a needle felted face. So it's slightly different. They're both very charming and quite easy to make. So if you want to embroider the face, you have to pick your whatever eye color. Let's see what we've got. I've got in my very exciting box here. Bearing in mind, I'm not going to keep that in, so I'm just going to opt for blue. That seems the first one that comes to hand. And you basically take a strand like you did with the hair, but this time you need a longer needle because you have to go all the way through the head. And I'm just going to do this as a bit of a close-up so you can see better what I'm actually doing here. So you need to thread the embroidery thread onto your needle. There you go. And then starting at the back of the head, you also tidy your thread away. I'm not going to do this now because I want to take it out again. And then you go all the way from the back of the head into the front of the head, and you try to aim to come out in that eye line that you tied. And you might have to do this sort of a few attempts, as I've just done. And one of the things to make a face look quite cute, it's really nice to have the eyes quite far apart. So if you want to embroider the eyes, then you go in with your embroidery thread, and then you go across for as many times as you want to make the eyes smaller or bigger. There. And then instead of going back through the back of the head to get to the other eye, you basically go across behind the nose, and this is where you need to look at the face from the front on to make sure that you have the eyes on the same level and the same distance apart from from the nose. And then you can again go back and in and out of the fabric, so you don't have to go through the head each time. It's only when you need to tidy the thread away. And then you go back out of the head on the back with that super long needle there, and then you tidy that away, and you've embroidered 2 eyes on either side of the nose. So this is and then obviously you do the same with the mouth, but just one. If this is the way if you want to embroider the eyes, but I like the needle felted version, so I'm going to take this out again. I might just have to cut it and pull it from the back. But if you don't have a felting needle, if you don't know how to needle felt, if you haven't got a clue what I'm talking about, then just use then don't needle felt. Just embroider the eyes onto it, or leave the face without any other details. There we go. So the eyes have gone again, and now to needle felting. So you've got your little face here. I'm just going to move that book out of the way a little bit. I've actually got a cutting mat here because the white didn't work so well yesterday, but today it might be fine. Got a lot of messy bits here. Let's put these out of the way. So for the eyes, you need tiny amounts of needle felting wool. I've got a few wisps here, and same for the mouth. I've got a tiny bit here, a little bit of an orangey pink, and then this is a brown. And all you need to do is start off by using tiny amounts, and preferably use a small felting needle, which which I just have to grab out of my stash here because I haven't got one in that pin cushion. So let's do this one. Okay, got my small felting needle, and then all you do is you just stab it very gently into the surface of the stockinette. What you don't want to do is you don't want to tear the stockinette, so you're being quite gentle with this. And I'm just and here I'm making a nice round eye shape, and I'm felting this through the stockinette, into the tube as the layer below, and just about on the surface of the wool, so that the eye goes in a little bit. But I'm not going crazy on needle felting this too much because I don't want it to destroy the stockinette fabric. And then I've just got to turn this round so I can actually see where I need to put the second bit. With needle felting, it's always best to do little, so go small with your portions, because you can always add more, especially with if you needle felt onto a face, because if you need to take this off now, it will leave a mark. There's no doubt about it, because you've been piercing the fabric with your needle, and it does look better to have a delicate face rather than a very made-up face. Practice first. I will show you the doll where I've gone a little bit more to town with a needle felted face. I just need to reach her. Oh, knocked all sorts of things off. Here you see the face is needle felted. All of this detail is needle felted, and if you can do this with a little bit of practice, then go for it. But it can also be quite scary to needle felt a head when you go wrong with it, and then suddenly you've got to take it off, and it might not. Let's look at her the right way around. It's quite charming. You can give more of an expression. You can make the eyes wide open. You can choose more colors in the face and in the eyes. So that's just another way of making a more detailed face. But we're keeping this really simple because that's one of the first dolls that you're making, so we don't want to go crazy on this. And then similarly with the mouth, try and keep this as a triangle, so the eyes have the same distance as the mouth to the eyes, and then you just do the same again. Just stab it very gently into the stockinette face, and don't exaggerate the expressions unless you're making a particular doll. But I'm keeping I'm keeping the features really delicate. Let there be room for the imagination. So he's got quite a small mouth, and that's it really. So compared to this one, every single one will always look different. With him I gave him a nose. He doesn't have a nose. I can't tell what I prefer. I prefer them both pretty much the same. If you have made a doll with a completely round face, then you just have to again just put the details onto the face. You haven't got the eye line to guide you, but in general it's always best to have the eyes in the center of the head. So we tied the doll in the center of the head, so also put the eyes in the center of the head. People will more naturally want to put the eyes higher, but they're actually in the middle, in the center line of the face, eyes, and then the mouth obviously at an equal distance to the eyes to form a triangle. So I've finished the face here, and I'm going to put that head away now, and we're going to move on to the body. But before that, I'm going to have a quick look at what people are commenting and saying, just in case there are questions that I need to answer. So let's have a look. Oh my goodness, you're making me hungry, Pamela. She's got tea and peanut butter waffle with honey at the ready. That is just that sounds too delicious. Oh, yeah, well, that's what Emma also thinks. Jane, you're a bit behind. That is probably because you didn't get your pack yet. So don't panic. You can follow the tutorial from the very beginning, and the advantage is you can actually press pause and fast forward. So if you need to catch up with certain things, you can press the pause button, and if you're fed up with my waffle, you can just fast forward. So that sounds like a really good deal. Yep, in at the ready, I've cut mine out. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so you've cut the fabric out, Jana, that's great. Good morning, Kathy. Sorry, I meant I've just joined you. Oh, I see, you were a little bit late. Okay, well, it's really nice to have you here, Jane, so that's lovely. Do you do anything to make the nose look more prominent? Faith, yes, you do. So you can. The best thing is to make a massive big nose, and when you make it, it looks as if it shouldn't be that big. And then just put the stockinette fabric and stretch it over it and see how that now looks in proportion. I have actually got a doll where I made a much larger nose. Don't know if you can see him. There. He's got sort of quite a prominent nose here. This nose is actually, it's sculpted onto the head before I put the gauze over it. So he is also featured in the book, and if you want to give your doll a bigger nose, you can do. It will, I'm just preparing you now, it will look very, very weird when you haven't got the face color skin over the top. The skin colored face over the top, that way around. But it because it looks totally exaggerated, so you have to make quite an exaggerated face for it to work, for the stockinette to go over the top. Right, next bit. So what I hope that everybody has done now, you've got your template, and this one I haven't cut out yet, but I've cut the hat out and I've cut the body out. And there was a good point made yesterday. So these templates, they allow for the seam allowance. I did tell you I'm not a proficient sewer, so I don't think to mention these things. And all I'm doing is now I'm cutting along the black line to cut out the template. There. And I show you how to, I saw actually a really great picture of Chris, who's had it all sorted and laid out on his fabric, and then he was just cutting around the ends. If you buy what we sell as a fat quarter of velour from us, you have absolutely plenty of fabric to make this size doll. You have lots left over, and of course you can scale the dolls up and down. You might have to adjust the size of the head as well, but why not make a smaller one? When I made little Edwin, oh, I shouldn't call it Edwin, she's actually called Edwina after my grandmother, but I'm falling into the trap of pronouncing her name in the English way. If you want to make a smaller one, if you look at the book, I've only increased the size of the template by 100% rather than 250 as it says in the book. So you can make a slightly smaller version of the doll. Her head admittedly is quite big, but again, you can adjust that. Sometimes people like dolls with bigger heads, sometimes they prefer them with smaller heads. There is no right or wrong, it's whatever you prefer and whatever your preference is. So now there's a design of these of this type of doll, the way that they're sewn together. I will tell you the story about this. So I wanted to make dolls for my children, but I am not a sewer. I find it really, how can I say, I get really bored by sewing, and I find it particularly hard to be neat and precise and focus and keep it all the same. So if I was making a doll with separate limbs, which is what most of these kind of dolls are made of, they have separate limbs. So they have legs, arms, all sewn separately. So you end up with at least, because you've got your your head, that's one body part, then you've got two arms, that's three body parts, then you've got two legs, that's five body parts, and then the body, you end up with 6 body parts that all have to be sewn together. Just imagining that, to me, feels like a complete and utter nightmare. I just can't do it. And worse still, if you then have front and back as well separately, you can in some cases add another 2 or 3 on top of that. That's not how I work. My brain doesn't work like that. And also what I've found is, if you've got body parts that you have to attach, if you imagine you give this to a child, that's the first thing, is they pick it up by the arm, and so there's a lot of wear and tear all the time on the arm or on the leg. It's bad enough that the head needs to be attached, but it happens quite often that the arm gets pulled off, or that the seam comes loose, or anything like that, and I just couldn't cope with that. So I've come up with this design where you have one part, this one, when you fold the arms over, makes already 2 complete arms, half a body and half the legs. And then if you fit that next piece into the front, that makes a complete doll's body with all the legs and all the arms. And best of all, the arms can't be pulled off because they're actually attached to the fabric. And that is the reason why all the doll designs in the book, whether it's a doll that's already a dressed body, or whether it's a doll that has got the naked body like that, they all are made in the same way. The arms are part of the fabric, as you can see here at the back, and the legs are too. You can put stitches across on these as well to give it more of a crease, or make it look more separate. Because the seam for the shoulders are at the front, it naturally bends the arms forward, so you don't have to worry so much about positioning the arms. And none of these dolls are jointed. They are very simple soft dolls that anybody or everybody should be able to sew, even if you are, like me, not a particularly great sewer. So I've cut my 3 parts out. Got my hat, then the 2 parts for the body here, and it's now, because you've got a lot of fabric to play with, and 1 4 is this. It's massive. Got a big piece to play with. If you lay this down and obviously cut from the back, not from the front, and I'm making a yellow doll in case you've missed that, then you could lay out, if you want to be very economical with your fabric, lay it out and then pin it down, pin the fabric pieces down, or pin one down at least. That's how I would do it. But in any case, if you just want to see how much space they take up, just lay them down however you want to. If you feel that there is a better way of doing it to save fabric, I'm now going down here. Yeah, they fit all the way side by side as well, and then maybe fit the hat in here. But I think if you did that, look how much space you've got left. You've got almost the same again. In fact, you do. You could make 2 dolls out of this fabric. So that is the way that I would do it. Lay it out either side by side or across, and then I'm going to, I know now this fits there, and I know this fits there. So what I do is I just pin just the 1 part on first. And if you hear me talk and you're already a sewer, you're probably going to have a laugh, because it will be quite obvious to you, but I promise you it's not obvious to me. And I yeah, it's just not my preferred craft. But if I can do it my way, then I am happy. So you could now start cutting around the edge like this. You can put more pins in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut around the fabric, so I can just take this small piece now and work on that. There. Put the other bit away for now. So I'm going to cut around the fabric. The velour is quite forgiving in that you will find this when you sew. When you sew with it, the stitches disappear into it, and it has got a stretch in it because it has got a little bit of man-made fiber in there as well. Just need to put that pin in a bit better. Just pulling it. So you don't need to leave a seam allowance because I've allowed that to be part of the fabric already. And I'm just cutting my way around the outside here. And around this end as well. I've actually gone right to the end where you know, there is a word for it, a professional word. I've forgotten what it's called now, but you know, where the fabric has been pinned down, or I don't really know why it's there. I told you I'm rubbish at sewing. I don't even know what I'm talking about. It's the side where you sometimes have like pinholes in them. What is it called again? Anyway, I know somebody will tell me what it's called. So I'm cutting all the way around fabric, getting into the bit here between the legs now. And it does help to have it pinned down on the crucial parts as well, so you don't lose the fabric and it detaches itself. And just work your way around it, cutting it out as you go. There. So there's my fabric cut out. That's what it looks like from the other end. And now I'm going to take all the pins out. There. There we go. Put this to one side, and I've got one part of the body cut out. Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm going to put this to one side, and now I'm going to pin down the other bit. And I decided to do it below the first body part, so I'm going to lay this out here like that. And then there was enough left to put my hat on top here, so that's perfect. So I'm going to put it down same as before. You're probably all going to be very bored watching this, but at least if you don't know it, if only one of you doesn't know how to do this, then that will help at least one of you. And we don't want to leave anybody behind. We want everybody to be on the same page. Oh, that's already moved. I'll take this out again. There are many times when I don't bother pinning things down. I'm very naughty like that, and I often regret it. So don't try it. Don't try it without pinning it down. So I'm pinning the extremities down first, arms and legs, because they're the ones that seem to be wriggling out of position. There, and then I'm doing top of the neck or shoulder. Another one here. If you've got a large surface to lay your shape down, that definitely helps. And I'm doing the side of the legs, and I'm going to go do the other side of the leg, and then I'm going to do the bit between the legs as well, because that I found earlier was hard to keep in place. There we go. That's it. So because I don't want all this bit of fabric to drape along, I'm just going to cut roughly the shape, so I have a smaller piece that I need to handle, rather than this great big end of fabric that's still here. Put this to one side. So now I'm just doing very boring cutting all around the shape, same as I did with the smaller part. It's probably good to start with the smaller part, gets you used to the fabric and how it behaves. It is quite slidey, because it's so soft, but on the upside it is very forgiving. So it does, if you're not a very neat sewer, the stitches will just disappear into the fabric, and unless you've got great big loops, they will just disappear. If you sew this by machine, I have absolutely no idea what needle you have to use. It is a stretchy fabric, so I'm kind of guessing it needs to be a jersey needle. And as I said, I don't even know what I'm talking about because I don't do any sewing machine sewing. I just know that there are different types of needles because I used to own a haberdashery shop as a non-sewer, which was quite fun. And but if anybody wants to tell me in the comments now what sewing machine needle you would be using, that might be useful if I say that out loud for those who are watching this later and they can't read the comments anymore. At some point these comments disappear, though we haven't quite worked out how long it takes for them to disappear and why they disappear. Right, oh, selvage, that's it. Thank you, Jana. I knew I could rely on you. So that's the bit on the side that's not so nice. There, I don't know if you can even see it. It has got I think it must be where they stretch the fabric or pin it down or something. And with a velour, it doesn't really matter. You can't actually tell that's happened on the right side. You can only see it on the wrong side. But if you use other fabric where it does matter, then just bear in mind not to use that self-rich. Yes, loads of fabric left. That's what Chris says. Brilliant. Let's just see. Oh, what kind of tea am I drinking today? I am so boring, but I'm having peppermint tea because it's nice and thirst quenching, and then I don't have to have a bottle of water here, and then I don't have to take a wee break. So my cup of peppermint tea keeps me going, and smells nice too. Such a fun make. That's what Kathy says. May have to catch up later as I've taken a long coffee break. Alex sends her love. She's had to go out this morning. Oh, thank you, Kathy. Alex has already been excused, but it's really nice that she's thinking of us. Yes, I am signing the books. I don't know what that was in reply to. Have I got one that's signed? Oh yes, I have one that's signed, and they're all signed if you buy them from us at the makers. And I signed them with "Let's sow some love." I thought that was really appropriate. And we are the makers. There you go. You can see it again. And it's makers with 2 S's because one's for Steffi and one's for Sophie. And Sophie is on the premises, but she's upstairs, probably answering lots of customer queries and working on the next projects that we're dreaming up. So cutting around here still. I also want to read at the same time, but that's impossible. Cutting and reading. It's easier to do that with needle sighting. Keep your pattern pieces in direction of the fabric. Oh yeah, that is a good point actually, because you want the stretch to be from the side. So it's exactly like with the stockinette. Make sure that the stretch is sideways, and you can't see this, but this is the bit that stretches this way, and this is the way that the fabric runs, and this is less stretchy. So you want the fabric to stretch sideways. Thank you, Jana. That's a really good point to point that out. I mentioned it yesterday with the stockinette, but I didn't mention it again today. So make sure that the stretch is sideways. Otherwise, you end up with a really long doll, and it's better to end up with a doll that is sort of slightly fatter than one that just suddenly becomes completely, well, twice as long maybe. So I'm still cutting around the template here. There. Chris is saying, I had to ask my dad for a bit of help. He used to be a sailmaker, so was used to dealing with patterns. He suggested drawing around the pieces. forget. Well, that's another thing you could do. Sorry. He said it was safer that way. You don't spoil the pattern. That is actually a good point. Okay, you see, you just notice how unconventional I am. That's the nice way of putting how professional I am when it comes to sewing. Yes, you can also draw around the pattern onto the fabric. Now, what do you use to draw around it? Well, it is a fabric that does stretch. So if you've got something that you have to put pressure on, you stretch the fabric as you're drawing around it. So there are lots of invisible, well, they're not invisible as you're drawing, but they disappear after a while, pens to use for the drawing on fabrics. I would definitely not use anything that would spoil the fabric, in that the color would sort of soak into the fabric and then you can see it on the other side. And of course, if you're drawing around it, then always do it from the wrong side. As well. So there is that side, and now it's yellow on the other side, and I'm going to take all the pins out, and they need to be at the ready the pin, because I'm pinning now the fabric together, and then we can all do a bit of sewing together, because that is quite a long project to sew this body up. It's probably one of the longest things that you have to do when you make the dolls, unless you give them hair. That also can take a long time to make hair on the head. Right, so there's my piece of fabric. That's going to be the back and the front arms. So what I need to do now is I need to keep it on the wrong side. So at the moment I'm showing the right side, because the I need to pin it together with and I'm just going to go a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. Right, so I've got my fabric here now, and it's at the moment showing the right side up, and then I'm putting my other piece with the right side down on top of it, lining it up as best as I can so that the legs, and this is quite tricky because these two pieces on top of each other, you can't slide them. They don't slide. They have to sit on top or don't sit on top, basically. So line the feet up. Now, if the top is slightly overlapping, don't worry about that. Just make sure that the legs are lined up there. And what you do now is you fold the arms down so that the little end of the arms are lined up too. And now you're going to use your pins, and you pin the whole two pieces together so they sit on top of each other, and they're nicely lined up. So I'm starting with the arms, and then I'm working. Now this bit here, that front part of the doll, which is this part of the doll in real terms, we're not going to sew it up just yet. This is going to stay open for now. Okay, so I'm not even pinning it. We don't need to pin it, but I am pinning everywhere else around the whole of the body. I'm working my way around, and I'm pinning this a little bit more thoroughly than I did when I cut around the pattern. There. And then around that side. I'm gonna get some more pins on the go here. Going around the base here, trying to keep this nice and lined up, and around this side as well. So it does take quite a few pins, but if you don't have pins to hand, as many as that, then just pin it more thoroughly where you're sewing first, and pin the other bits together less thoroughly, and then where you have sewn, you can take the pin out because that's held together then by your stitches, and then just keep going, moving the pins around to the areas where you need the pins to be in the precise position so that you can sew it up as you go along. The fabric naturally wants to curl outwards, so you have to force it to be in the place where you want it to be. And try and be precise around that part here at the front where the fabrics meet. Can you see how it's curling? But just try and be as precise as you can under the arm, because that will pay off later when you have to sew up the shoulder parts. So I'm just pinning that down here now as my last pin. So what you've got now is you've got the whole body shape inside out. So the arms have been folded over to make 2 complete arms, front and back. The legs are complete now because you've got the front part is the front here, and then the other part is here at the back. And all you've got is this flappy bit open here, which we're not going to sew up, but if it gets on your nerves, then you could just put a pin in the top where the neck opening is, which will stay open for obvious reasons because we have to put the head in there later. And then all you need to do is get your sewing thread ready. If you've had your pack from us, you will have a color matching sewing thread, and I'm just trying to dig for mine because I've got a bright yellow one here that will work with my yellow fabric, and you will obviously have red or blue. Just trying to find the beginning. There it is. Right. And now the reason why I say this is the boring bit is because you have to be really, really diligent sewing this as best as you can, because imagine you stuffing this and there's going to be a lot of pressure on it from the stuffing inside, and depending how tightly you stuff it. But you really, this is the part where you really don't want to skimp. So it doesn't matter if you stitch, it's not very neat, but just make sure it's small and nice and tight. And so start by sewing up at the end of the sleeve. Do not sew that hole up, okay? We do need to put little hands in there later on. So don't sew that part up at all, please, because that's quite important. It's there. So I'm using a back stitch, exactly the same stitch that we used by sewing the stockinette tube to fit over the head as the outer. I'm just going to cut an uneven piece of thread off, and now I'm literally working my way boringly around. You might like this. This is the bit where I just sit and I just go into a meditative state, because it is very time consuming to go all the way around in tiny stitches, and then at the very end, when you've sewn it all up with back stitch, you go over it again with a blanket stitch, just as a double security. The fabric doesn't actually fray naturally, but it's just another stitch behind a stitch that will stop the fabric from coming open, because it will, if you're making a doll that is going to be loved and used and cuddled and carried and manhandled, then you do need to have a really solid seam. And the seam allowance is about 5 millimeters, so it's about ½ centimeter. It's not huge. It's definitely less than what we did for the stockinette tube. And all I'm doing now is I'm literally just sewing around the edge. I've doubled my thread up so it's extra strong, and you just basically sew this up. And I'm not going to do the whole of, I will have to do some homework myself to get to sew the whole of the body up, but I will show you in a minute, because this is something that I need you to do at home as well. I will show you in a minute how to do the little hands as well, and then maybe we can do these together today. And but I'm definitely waiting until you're all at the stage to do a bit of sewing, so you know where you're heading if you are making this doll while I'm sitting here with you. I will also read some of the comments in a minute. So where are we? Oh, I think I need to refresh my screen here as well, because the comments haven't refreshed in a while. Have a cup of tea as well. Yes, Chris, the stretch goes across. That's it. So I'm reading from the bottom again, that's not usually very helpful. Keep your pattern pieces in the direction of the fabric, i.e. place piece vertically. I had to ask my dad for a bit of help. Oh no, that we've covered that. I traced the pattern on baking paper, then pin. Oh, well, yes, of course. That I think that's what people do who are sewers. That's not what people do who like me, who just make things up on the hoof. But that's a good idea, because then your pattern will stay intact forever. So you could use baking parchment paper or baking paper, and then draw, because it's slightly see-through, draw around the really black line. It's nice and thick line as well, so it will definitely look through. Ballpoint needle for jersey fabric. Thank you, Donna. That's very helpful. So if you're not sewing this, then use your sewing machine with a ballpoint needle, and you can go around the seam in a jiffy, whereas us mere mortal sewers have to sit and do this by hand. I actually, even though I say it's boring, like I say, I really do enjoy doing it, because it's quite satisfying as well at the same time to see these little stitches side by side. And the most annoying thing is if you double up your thread, is that you get an extra loop, and I find that really annoying. And I've just taken a pin out because I can hold this with my finger now. This is what I meant earlier. If you don't have enough pins, then you can just use the ones that you've just taken out and put them into another position where they're more needed now. So yes, I often feel I have to apologize that I'm not a great sewer, but then I also think there are lots of people like me out there who have never become friends with a sewing machine. I don't even have the desire to use one. I want to sew by hand. I love sewing by hand. I know it takes a little bit longer, but I actually do quite like that idea. It's the same when I needle felt. I prefer just using, most of the time, a single needle. And people often talk about these needle felting machines that actually do the felting for you. And I think that must be a really good idea if you've got trouble with your hands and fingers. But I just like the idea that I'm literally doing this stitch by stitch myself. But a lot of you will think, well, why on earth would you want to do that? Just get the sewing machine out and whiz around it, and then you're done. So there's no right or wrong. It's personal preference. Do what you like, and that will be absolutely the right thing for you. So I'm sewing my way around this part of the doll. I'm actually really enjoying this yellow fabric because it is literally as bright as the sun, even though I'm looking at the back at the moment, but I'm anticipating what it's like when I turn it the right way around. I'm giving this quite a good tuck, so I'm not leaving stitches loose. I'm not. It's not like I'm gathering them too much, but I do sew it really tightly because I really don't want the seam to be the fragile part of the doll. It's really important. It's not. I've got an extra loop there now. Ah, it's gone. So remember, a back stitch is where you literally go back on yourself, and then you go 2 stitches forward. That's the tricky part, is when you get to under the arm bit, which I'm going to show you a little bit closer up. So I've worked my way as far as the under the arm. The yellow that you see here is the fabric naturally curling out, because that's what it wants to do. And then the seam on the other side, so the not so nice looking part of my back stitch, looks a bit more messy because you're always skipping a stitch, and so it's like you're overtaking one all the time. And when you get to the underarm bit, you have that bit here, the end of that sleeve. You've got the beginning of the body here, and then you've also got the opposite side, and all of that needs to be somehow come together. So what I do is, and you still need to do it on the inside. So you try and cross that bridge, or cross that gap, by going from the sleeve into the body, and then you're starting a new area by going along the body now. So I've crossed that gap between the end of that sleeve and the body, and now I'm starting by going along my leg part, and I've got to turn this around because I'm not almost like change direction. So to keep up with the stitch that I'm doing, where I'm going back a stitch and then forward 2, I need to I've just had to move the fabric so that it actually, ooh, it's gone out of the picture as well, so you can't see it at all now. Sorry about that. There. So I'm still working my way along the side here. I'm just going to read a few more comments. Standard needle, longer stitch. What's that in reply to? Standard needle, longer stitch. Standard needle, longer stitch. Okay, I have no idea why you're saying that, Jana, but maybe you can put us in the picture. That's a really good idea for when you're making anything using templates in our instructions leaflets too, where they are needed to cut out onto felt sheets. Yes, so that will come back to the parchment paper, so that's great. Sewing machines have different needles. I thought they were all the same. Oh my goodness, Chris, you're worse than me. Yes, I didn't know they had different needles until as I said, I used to run a haberdashery shop, and yeah, they do have different needles. They have different numbers for the sizes, as well as having specialist needles. So you have needles for jersey, for jeans, for leather. And but don't ask me too many details because I've forgotten, and as I don't use them, it's not stuck in my memory. So and Emma just kindly reminds us that the water lily instructions are finally online to buy as a PDF now. If you've been watching some of the live streams, you know that we've needle felted onto felt a water lily or a lotus. Waiting for mine to be delivered. Is that the doll pack, Diane? If you're still waiting for postage, that is not because we are behind with packing our orders. We are working harder than we have ever done. It is mostly to do with the postal system at the moment being not very consistent in all parts of the country. So in some areas it works really well, but we've had reports back that in some areas they only get a delivery once or twice a week. And if you are in an area where your postman has been ill and needs to be replaced by somebody else, then it obviously all of that takes a little bit longer. So in fact, we had a postman yesterday. I shouldn't really be telling you this. We had one of the guys here from the estate come to us and delivered us a parcel that we had just posted, because the postman drove off with a boot open. So we're dreading how many parcels he lost on the way, but I don't think he did. He probably would have noticed that. But yeah, one parcel, I don't know who it's for, didn't make it yesterday because it ended up falling out of the postman's car. Anyway, don't tell anybody. Oh, Diane, you cut straight from the fabric. Too impatient to get going. That's just like me. I'm terrible when it comes to yeah, I just always think, oh, there must be a quicker way of doing this, and then sometimes I must say I regret it because it's not as neat as it could be. I'm not saying that what I'm doing right now should be done in a different way, but sometimes in general I regret cutting a step out, but it's not very often. I usually always go the fast track way. I can't stand pins, so I use mini clips and tailor's chalk. Oh, I don't know what mini clips are, but that sounds like a good idea. If you're yeah, please do share all the inside tricks and tips from the sewing side of crafts, because if you're waiting for them to come from me, you can wait a long time. As I say, I am not really a natural sewer. I do like mending, not that I ever mend anything because I haven't got the time, but I do like the idea of mending, and I love trying to mend things in a way that you can't tell that it's been mended, if you see what I mean. Either make a feature out of it, or yeah, think creatively, what can I do with this? So now I'm coming to the end of my thread, and I'm having to get rid of it. And what I do is I just put a blanket stitch over the bit that I've just sewn. That's just to get rid of my thread. That's not saying that I'm not going to go over that again, but that's how I get rid of my thread. But you might just sew up and down a little bit. There we go. So that's my first lot done. So now I've sewn around under the arm and along that curved leg. And there is a German saying, I am also always very tempted to have a massive long thread. And there is a German saying, if anybody's watching who is German, they will know what I'm saying, but I also explain it to you. It's called langes Fädchen, faules Mädchen. And basically what it means, obviously it rhymes in German. I don't think I can get it to rhyme in English, but it means a long thread is a lazy girl. It's totally sexist. I guess it's an old saying, but it basically means if you have a long thread, it means you're lazy. And I have to constantly remind myself not to have a long thread. It's not that I'm lazy, I'm impatient. So, langes Fädchen, faules Mädchen. Where do these sayings come from? And they're so totally inappropriate these days. Anyway, so I'm restarted my thread, and I'm going round the outside of the leg. I'm going to make it to halfway, and then I'll show you how to make the hands, so that what you've got to get on with over the weekend is, or until the next session, is you need to make the whole body so that it's sewn up, and then you need to cut out the hat and sew the hat up as well. The hat is really easy to sew up. You literally the hat that you have got, the template, I'll just show it to you, is where's my hat gone? There. The hat is the full size of the hat, and you just have to half it, so that you sew along this longer part of it. It's the straight edge that you sew together, this bit here, not the curved bit. The reason why that is curved is because it needs to sit on a round head. So when you have the hat all complete, you can't tell anymore that it's curved, because I don't actually know why, but it just doesn't look curved. It only looks curved when it's flat, when it's 2D. You'll find also I have problems sometimes sort of translating 2D into 3D. It's quite funny at times, because Sophie is the opposite to me. She has a total convertible brain that works out 2D into 3D, and I literally sometimes have to do it to understand it. And that's the same with how I've designed these doll patterns. I just had to play around. There was no science that went into this whatsoever. It's all just practical and sort of, yeah, just trying to imagine what I want it to be like, and then just constantly trial and error until it finally makes all sense in a real term as well. But I'm really bad at imagining things like that. So there we go. Which is one of the reasons why I love needle felting, because you can sort of, it happens as you go along, and you can see it happening. It's a little bit more complicated when you have to plan ahead with sewing and have the patterns ready for other people to use too. But thankfully, in my book, which obviously has been edited and been tried and tested, you don't have to worry about this, because all of these patterns here in the back, they genuinely work. So there's the Hannah pattern. If you have the book at home, you have to blow up which it doesn't mean you have to blow up anything. It means you have to increase the size. Don't blow anything up. And then you've got the other patterns for some of the other dolls in there as well. And there are some things that are true to size, like this little apron or tunic is the right size. And I think this hat is the full size as well. So there are different types of hats as well that different dolls fit. And what else is in there? Yeah, so this shape here, this triangle, you would also have to increase underneath the photocopier. And then there's also a knitted doll in there, so don't underestimate if you've got knitting yarn, you need to make it into a chunky if it's not chunky. And if to make a chunky yarn, you can use there's the knitting pattern. Sorry, the knitting dolls, and the knitting pattern is here as well. And it's got a very similar principle. Again, the shape of this finished knitted item is where you have again all parts in one. In fact, all of the parts are one, so you have got the front and the back. You just need to knit one single part, and then you've got the head separately. It's just the way that you fold it and sew it together that turns it into the shape of the doll. And so what I was saying is that if you want to knit and you haven't got the right yarn at home, 2 double knitting strands make a chunky. So you could double that up because most people have got double knitting at home. We love our the retreat yarn, which is the one that we stock, and it's actually I've made the hair out of this retreat. It's really lovely. It's an unplied yarn, so it's a little bit like pencil roving, and that's why it works really well for hair. But it knits up beautifully. I haven't got anything down here. I will show you. Oh, I've just got a strand here, so I can show you. So it's quite a thin. It's thin in terms of needle felting, as if you call it a roving or a top, but it's actually a chunky in terms of knitting, and it comes in different colors and in patterns as well. Absolutely love this for doing a knitted doll. It's definitely one of the other projects that I would like to do, is to make a knitted doll as well. They are really, really lovely. I've got one sitting here, and they're really soft and tactile. And also, this is probably something that children can do. If your child can knit, it's a really simple knitting pattern. You might just have to give a little bit of help. It's all done in one, even though the upper part is a different color to the bottom part. That's because you just change yarns to make it a different part. And then under all the seams are at the back, so it's a completely seamless knitting pattern at the front. Really love this one. Right, how's everybody getting on? I'm just going to go a bit bigger here again, so I can have a look at how people are doing on screen. Yes, Chris, you also get a heavier needle for heavier fabric. Well, there you go. That's what I said. Denim, light needles for the fine fabric, and so on. Thank you, Donna. Oh, thank you, Chris. Steffi, you're doing an amazing job. If I can understand and follow along, that's a miracle. It means something is going right. Oh, thank you. That's I take that as a total compliment. Thank you. So what else? I can't stand pins. Oh no, I've done that already. You see, this is the trouble when I start reading backwards. Not good. What else is going on here? Yes, use the pin. Yes, use the pin, then tack. Oh, I see. So that's when you tack. I think that's to do with you mean tacking by with the sewing machine? Because tacking just means putting in a very rough stitch that just will hold it together, so you don't you then don't have to work with pins anymore. I'm using slightly longer stitch than normal on the sewing machine, 3.5 instead of 2.5. Sewed up beautifully with standard foot and needle. Oh, brilliant. So there you go. If you're a sewing machine sewer and you can't read the comments anymore, Kathy recommends on the velour fabric that you can use a longer stitch than normal on the sewing machine. So you use 3.5 instead of 2.5, and you just use the standard foot and needle. I've no idea what I've just said, but if that makes sense to you as a sewing machine sewer, go for it. I can use a sewing machine, says Jane. But I think doing these dolls by hand is quite mindful. Absolutely. I think it would probably give you chance to think about who you're sewing it for, if that makes sense. Yeah. Well, this is what I love sewing them by hand, but only because I don't use a sewing machine. I'm sure you can be quite mindful using a sewing machine as well, but I often just think every tiny little stitch, I've just sewn a tiny little bit of love into the doll. Or when I made the Edwina doll, when in memory of my grandmother who died last Friday, actually, tomorrow a week already. Gosh, I just took the time to sew in peace and quiet, and then I just thought of all the memories that I held with her, and about her when I was a child, staying at her house, and she, oh my goodness. Oh, I don't know if any of you, do any of you know the Grimm's fairy tale? Oh, it's probably not that called in English, but it's Frau Holle. It's the one where the lady, she shakes her big feather bed out of the window and it snows in the world. Does anybody know which one that is I don't even know. I've not read it to my children in English. I don't even know if it's one of the fairy tales that has been sort of used in the English children's literature. But anyway, my grandmother, she had a feather down bed like that, and it was, you literally, when I lay underneath it as a child, it just felt like somebody was lying on top of me. It was so big and heavy. I loved it. It just made you feel really safe. And she died in the house that she's lived all her life in. In fact, she was born in that house as well. And I'm thinking the whole of the time it hasn't much improvements done to it either. But what I do remember, her bed was absolutely ginormous. And well, it probably wasn't that big, but when you're a child, everything seems to be a lot bigger. And I was lying, and she was on the first floor, but there was eaves, so that she had a slight. It was quite tall. It wasn't like you didn't bang your head, but above the bed, on that sloping wall, was hanging a picture. And if it ever fell down, it would have literally fallen on top of your head, of a lady with a baby. Now I don't actually know, but I remember falling asleep. It was an oil painting, falling asleep, with that picture over my head, looking at it and just feeling so, I don't know, felt so safe and happy in that big bed. And I used to sleep in her bed basically. So she would come to bed later on the other side. I never knew she was there because the bed was so ginormous, and that duvet was. There were two duvets, obviously, because that's what Germans don't have double duvets for some reason. And then in the morning she would take the whole duvet and she would shake it out of the window and leave it to air for the whole of the day, hanging out of the window. Obviously not if it was raining, but I remember, and in fact that is quite a distinct German memory I have got from growing up in Germany, that the Germans hang their bedding out of their window during the day to air it, to get all the smelly night smells out of it. And then you'd bring it in sort of mid-morning when you've done all the chores and you've probably dusted and hoovered and whatnot. You bring it in and then you make the bed. And then in the evening you go into a bed that's been hanging out in the fresh air for most of the day. So I do remember that. And even when I visited my grandmother 4 years ago, I said to her, can I please go and have a look in your bedroom? And it was just like that, as if I had only just slept in that bed the night before. So that was quite funny, and the picture was hanging there as well. So when I was sewing the Edwina doll, I was thinking of all those occasions when I used to stay at her house, and my most favorite food, and that sounds really really strange, that she used to cook for me, especially if I wasn't feeling very well. I don't know why I never felt very well when I was at her house, or maybe I just wanted that food and I said, oh, I don't feel very well. It's nothing fantastic, so brace yourself, this is going to be a huge disappointment. It was savory porridge, and it's basically porridge cooked with water, but instead of having milk or sugar or anything like that on it, it had a bouillon, like a stock cube in it, and that's it. It was just savory porridge. Used to love it, absolutely love it. That was such a good reason to go to her house. When it would be so easy to make it in your own house, but it was not the same. And yeah, I still have this now. I eat it now when I feel a little bit off color. That's all the food I want is savory porridge. And so when I was making Edwina doll, who is sitting here, there, that's her. I was thinking of all those childhood memories that I have got, and my grandmother. She also always had a cupboard full of treats, and I think that is probably what grandmothers do in general. Probably you've got stories about that too. It was when we went there on a Sunday often. You had to wear your best, which was like, hated that because I oh my goodness, I've got some really hideous pictures of me having to have pigtails and in a posh blouse or skirt. I hated blouses and skirts. In fact, I'm wearing one today, but I don't wear them very often because I think I've been traumatized as a child having to wear these horrible clothes that I really didn't like. I was a bit of a tomboy, so that was very inconvenient. And but that cupboard was bliss because there were all kinds of things that we could eat as much of as we wanted, and only at my grandmother's house were we allowed to do that. And when I say we, I have a 5-year younger sister, so obviously she benefited from that as well. So they're my stories of my grandmother, and I've thought them all through as I was sewing my little doll. So yes, Jane, coming back to the original comment that you made, I think it's really lovely to sit there stitch by stitch in peace and quiet, and having a few reflective thoughts. So whilst I was chatting, I've now finished my second thread, and shall we have a little peek inside because I'm getting nosy now. So this is now the under the arm, around the leg I've sewn, and now I'm just gonna it's obviously not ready to be turned round, but I'm just having a little peek because I want to see it. So I'm just turning that leg inside out. There you are, and you can see the seam that you have sewn. The stitches just sort of sink into the velour because it's so lovely and soft, and so you don't need to worry too much about being too neat, but do make it nice and tight so that the stitches will not uncome. So the rest I'm going to leave for me to do at the weekend, but I will show you very quickly how to make, and also the other thing is cut out the hat and sew the hat ready to fasten it onto the doll. And now I'm looking for the leftover piece of my stockinette, which you all cut yesterday. Where the heck did I put it? Okay, it's here somewhere. There it is. I found it. There. So what I suggest you do is you cut whatever you've got left over in half, like that. Just cut it in half. And then you can, mine looks about that size, and then you make a ball out of the stuffing wool that you've got in your kit, and you want the ball to be about the size that the little fist will be. So make it to your liking. Mine is about that big. You can squeeze it nice and tight. You've got two options now. You can either just wrap it up like a parcel, like this. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay, so you make a little fist like that, and you've got it's all bundled up like a little parcel, and then you just use the extra strong thread and wrap it around like we did with the bottom of the head, just nice and tight, and that's the easiest way to make a little hand. Don't worry how much of the fabric you've got left. It goes so quick making these. There, got a little hand, and put a knot on it to secure it. We can always cut excess of the fabric off, and definitely cut the excess of the. So that's all I want you to do is to do 2 of these. If you wanted to be a little bit more precise, then you could sew with a running stitch, and obviously not your colored thread, but use the more natural thread, and then you can pack your little ball inside and pull the thread, and it just sort of closes it up. But that's just another way of doing it. This is absolutely fine. So stick with this. Don't worry of which way the pattern runs. You don't have to worry about it being inside out. And then if you get your little parcel wrapped up like that, we worry about the excess fabric next week when we come back to this. So make 2 of those, finish sewing the body, and definitely cut the fabric for the hat and sew your hat. So you're sewing it up on the straight sides of the triangle. Forget the round bit that turns into the base of the hat once it's folded over and sewn together, and that will sit on top of the head. So you're sewing these 2 together inside out the same way as we've done with the body, and you can turn the head round the right way round already. And then we'll put the doll together and stuff it first of all on Monday, when we're all back on the 3rd tutorial of the 3 that we're doing, on the final one. And then your doll's done. How exciting is that? So I'll just check some of the comments, and if you've got anything else to say or to ask, do it now. I'll just give it another few minutes. And then all is left for me to say is have a lovely bank holiday weekend. Work a little bit more. It's mostly sewing, nothing technical really. If you are not managing to do the hands yourself, then I will I will repeat this on Monday, and you saw me how quickly I can make it. So it's not as if you're not going to be unsupported in this. So let's just have a quick look of what people are saying. I think Donna's gone. Elizabeth, coincidentally, I'm teaching my son how to do a tacking stitch. We are finding your tutorials very beneficial. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. Oh, I see. Bulldog clips. Life and finger savers. And I hadn't thought of bulldog clips. I love sewing when I have the time and space. I made my granddaughter's christening dress out of my wedding dress, which was scary, but worth it in the end. I wouldn't have a clue how to do that, so I'm totally in admiration phase. That's amazing. Oh, I have a body. Jana's done her body. Great. And she cheated again, which doesn't mean that she cheated. She just means that she's used a sewing machine, which is perfectly fine to do. I made a little heart last night to go in the doll. Oh, Chris, that's so nice. I used some of the offcuts. Oh, I love that. I know people who put little hearts into their dolls. You can still all do it because we haven't stuffed it yet. It's all still there. Or just a little something that is really special. Used to have a Grimm's fairy tale book as a child. Yeah, well, if you find that one, that would be amazing. I'm going to try that porridge. Sounds lovely. Well, I made it sound so great. It's actually just very plain food, but it does. It hits a spot when you need it. I bet it would be good left over and fried in a pan too. Oh my god, I love old porridge. Does anybody else like old porridge? It's like when my children eat porridge for breakfast, I always say, don't throw the rest away. I'm going to have it cold later, or maybe the day after. And you know, there is that saying about, what's it called? Porridge in the pot, 5 days old. Some like it cold, some like it hot. I don't know. It's something like that. I'm sure you know that saying. And they do say about porridge 5 days old. So obviously I must not be the only person who likes old porridge. So anyway, Kathy loves the fabric. It's super soft. I totally adore it. It's just, you just want to cuddle and squeeze it and surround yourself with it. It's really lovely, and it's a perfect fabric for making dolls, whether you're making them for children or for older people. Just, it's very tactile, very squishy, and you do want to touch it. I will just say one thing. All of you have been sent stuffing wool, which is basically the white wool butts that are great for stuffing. However, this doll actually has been stuffed with wool neps, and wool neps look like this. They are little wool balls, and they are really lovely for a pouch doll in particular. It's kind of different, squeezy and squishy. I haven't given you the choice in your packs. But if you are making a more sort of pouch doll, or like the triangle dolls that there's one sitting here, it actually it works better with wool nets. So we do sell these in larger quantities, enough to stuff a doll. So don't dismiss these for that reason. They're great for stuffing, and you can make them, you can stuff it really tight or you can keep it soft. It distributes easier, and it just has a different kind of squishiness to it. It's kind of, it's more, feels even more tactile because it's not just a straight squish. It's more of a, I don't know, can't explain it. You've got to make one and squish it yourself. So thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure having you all here, and thank you for commenting and keeping me going, and for all these amazing useful comments of things that I don't know terribly much about, but that will be very useful to other people. So that's been extremely helpful, and great job. Send photos, please send photos. If nothing else, I'll show them on my camera again, but I'd love to see your progression of the doll. Just let me know for the next live stream. If you're watching this at any point in the future, then I have got you have got a place where you can go, and it's Making Soft Dolls is a Facebook group you can join, or Everyone a Maker is also a Facebook group where we love to see any of the work that you do, from our materials, ideas, books, and so on, tutorials. And there's always lots of oohs and ahs waiting for you, and we're a very supportive group in both of the groups, so we'd love to see what you're doing. So until then, stay safe, enjoy the lovely weather if you can. Hopefully we'll hear some news this weekend on some of the relaxations of the lockdown, which may mean that you can see your family and your friends again in whatever format that will have to take place. It's all possible. You can keep yourself safe, and enjoy making the doll, whatever you need to finish off. So until then, I say goodbye, and we see you all on Monday. Have a lovely weekend.